I used to worry so much about doing things properly. And every time I would come across a habit that I wanted to break, I would tell myself, I just got to try harder. I got to try harder. Or other people would tell me, you just got to try harder. And I think try harder is bullshit. I don't think that try harder is ever going to work. Because if you already weren't doing something, trying harder to do it the same exact way is still going to get you the same results. Instead of try harder, I think we have to try differently. So, for example, I used to be late to everything. I was chronically late to everything. And so I would tell myself, I just have to try harder. I have to get up 5 minutes sooner. 5 minutes sooner in the morning always felt like a waste. Like I'm not going to do it. So the more I told myself I just have to try harder, I just have to set my clock differently, none of that ever worked. I was always late. What I had to do was figure out literally the root cause of my lateness. And ultimately, it came down to two reasons why I was always late. One was because the places that I needed to be, I desperately didn't want to be at. And two was because I didn't want to inadvertently be early to a thing because at that time in my life, I didn't like myself enough to be alone with myself. So what I did was I started to learn to love myself and I started to craft a life for myself where the places that I needed to be were places I wanted to be. Obviously, there's going to be some you can't. But then I started getting in the habit then of actually building in time where I would intentionally be early, knowing that I'd be alone with myself, with my own thoughts for that period of time, or that I would listen to music on my phone or read a book or play a game. It is a little bit easier with the cell phone, but I do not worry now about being too early. I actually really enjoy being too early. So that's my little soapbox rant on why we should never try harder.
I think that if we dive deeper into this one example of being on time for something or being late for something as a microcosm of why trying harder doesn't work, I have a really good example of why trying harder doesn't work or why getting upset about it or using this whole I should be on time, I'm always late and therefore I'm not a good person. I also, most of my life, have been late for things and it really drives me crazy. I hate being late. I hate being responsible for other people, knowing that I was late and that I was whatever, not able to get there on time. And so as an adult, probably from my 20s or my launch of my professional career, I have been on time to things. And if for any reason I am going to be late, I get upset and I get frustrated and I drive more aggressively. And I've really tamped this down quite a bit. But one of the huge negative results of that whole me getting upset about being late is now my 12-year-old son is obsessed with being on time. And if we're late for something or if we're about to be late to something, he gets upset. And there's no reason for a 12-year-old to be upset about being late to something. This is an unintended consequence that I deeply regret.
Wow. Okay. There's a lot in there. I think first thing I would want to do is challenge whether your son has this disdain for lateness because you've modeled it for him, or is it because he just has a sense of responsibility for being a citizen in the world now?
It's hard to tease those two things apart, but I tried very hard not to model that, but I know that I did. So I know that he has that same thing. And it's expanded more so that he always checks, Mom, do you have gas? And if there are people walking in a crosswalk, he always points them out to me. I've never hit someone with my car. It's like I see people who are walking in the crosswalk, but he takes this responsibility for things. And I'm afraid that I modeled that for him.
No, I think it's fantastic that he's becoming aware of the larger world. At 12 years old, he should be starting to recognize that there's a larger world around. So I used to teach confirmation at church. Confirmation is sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, middle school age. Other people that I know who taught confirmation were terrified to teach that age group because they're middle schoolers. But I loved that age group because they still had the wonder and curiosity of children, but were developing a sense of the greater world around them. And that combination was just so much fun to teach and to watch them. They're like their aha moments when they would realize things about the greater world. So I think he's exactly spot on for where he should be looking out at the greater world. Now, the part where he's getting on you about that. That's a whole different conversation. He does
Or
not need to be telling you how to drive at 12.
no, I used to race my car. I know how to drive quite well.
So I have this philosophy that people who are massively impatient, and every single narc in my life is massively impatient. But my theory is that the reason that they absolutely can't stand to wait in a line, or that they have to be late for everything because they can't be early, is because they are not comfortable being alone with themselves.
Maybe that's one of the things that we punish ourselves and we want to try harder when really we just need to reframe whether this is actually a problem or not. As
Mm-hmm.
you're saying, if you need to try harder to be on time, it's not because you need to be on time, it's because you need to like yourself. Maybe a person who doesn't like waiting in line needs to try harder to get there when there's not a line or come back in a different time. They need to try harder to be patient with the world or to like themselves or to be able to be alone with their thoughts. That's a much bigger picture than let's try harder to exercise more, be on time, and all of those tasks in life to do those better. I think it's probably almost always a deeper issue that we could work on.
Yes, and again, even with the way you framed it, they could try harder to like themselves is still not going to work.
No,
It's
no, right, right.
the try harder isn't going to work, but reframing, reshaping, trying different things.
Yes, I should try harder to not use the wrong language because it wasn't about
You
trying harder
should.
to like
You
yourself.
should. You
It's
should. You should.
the evaluation is, can I stay alone with my thoughts for 10 minutes? It's not, should I try harder to be patient with the world or
Yeah.
come back at a different time?
And maybe other people don't have an issue with that as far as their lateness, but I really would challenge people to really consider, why is it that you struggle to be early? Because a lot of the times I always plan to be early. So then if something happens that delays me, I'm on time. So then why wouldn't I always work to be early for a thing? And I guess that would be the work that I would challenge someone to do in this instance if they're chronically late. What is it about being early that is more repulsive to you than being late? Because you will be one or the other. Very rarely are you going to land it spot on. So that would be my
Right.
challenge to you. And don't give me this bullshit about I'm just so busy that I'm always running here and running there. That itself is also something that you might try harder not to do. What I would suggest, if you're always running here and there, is perhaps you've built a life for yourself that is just a little bit too full, more full than your life needs to be. Maybe it's time to prune some things.
With the caveat that parents of young children are going to be busy, there is
Oh, yeah.
a way to prioritize and make sure that there's something that you want to be on time for or need to be on time for. A court date, for example, you need to be on time for that, right? So if you're picking up your kid's swimsuit because they left it at the pool, or you have to go to your court date, go to your court date.
So this would be a great example, what you're talking about. Let's say they get out at 5 and you need to be there at 6 and you have to leave a half an hour early. That gives you a half an hour window. And every time you have that half hour window, you try to cook a meal that takes 20 minutes to cook. And then you have 10 minutes to eat it. And this is your routine. And you're chronically late because you cannot get that done in a half an hour. I don't think that trying harder is ever going to get you there. Is there a way to get the kid earlier so that then you have more time? Or do you have to build in a different way to do dinner? Is it just going to have to be dinner on the go? Or is it going to have to be you pack something and eat in the car, or grab a snack right now, eat afterwards? Just, you have to rethink it. You can't just keep trying the same thing over and over again and expect it to work differently.
Or evaluate the kids' activity. I know it's really hard to say because we want to give our kids every single opportunity, every single activity. And sometimes it's healthier for you and for your children to not.
3 of my 4 kids are already grown and have graduated high school and are out of the house. My 4th is a special needs kid with disabilities, so the activities are going to look really different for him. I do remember, however, with the kids and their activities, being surrounded by parents who I really think that they thought that if they exposed their kids to everything that was out there, that they would find the one thing that would be such a great passion that they would go on to be the best at it and make a crap ton of money doing it, and everybody could retire on that money. It was like they just were so scared that they would miss the opportunity, that if I didn't let my kids do music and sports and this other sport and karate and baseball and basketball and hockey, I might miss giving them that one thing that they were going to excel at. It's so incredibly rare that kids are going to excel at any of those extracurricular activities that you are exposing them to as a child.
And I had one kid, and she was maybe 3, 4, 5 years old. I wanted to know what her passion was. Not because she would become a famous person and make me retire. That was not my goal. It was just, I wanted to explore all of those things that she could do, and then she would find one, maybe two things that she would like. And so I put her in violin, ballet, soccer, chess, fencing, theater. So just those 6 that I can remember off the top of my head in the space of a year and a half. And I thought she would give some up and she'd like some more than others. And we decide by 5 years old or so which one she wanted to do. And she loved every single one of them. And that year was awful for me. So we had to really have some conversations and figure out which one or two she was going to stick with and let the rest go. And it was a much happier year the year after. And with my son, he was exposed to 2 things, and he likes both of those things. One's a summer sport, one's a winter sport. That's it. It's just super simple.
I want to give you kudos for that, because when I was talking about those parents, I was talking about you too. Because I remember that year, right? I remember we couldn't connect at all that whole year because you were so crazy busy with those activities. And I felt bad for you and I felt bad for her, but I got it. Like, I understood. I get it. Like, you want
Right.
to make sure that you don't miss the opportunity for the passion that your kid is going to find. But I want to give you kudos because it didn't take you very long to figure out that wasn't sustainable. And you are now a parent of a young adult who can look back and see that was not going to be sustainable. And so I just want to amplify your voice a little bit more for anybody who might be listening. It is not necessary to do that. It is not helpful or healthy to do that. And it creates a number of problems. For example, making you late for everything, which
Right.
then creates another whole set of problems. So if
Rush
you
to
want to
lunch, rush.
just take another 1 minute to just reiterate what you learned in that year.
I'm going to use the example of the game Sims. My daughter was born around 2005, and so in the early 2000s, there was a game Sims, and there was a very simple cheat code to make all of the money in the whole world. And there were ways to educate them. Books would teach them stuff, and they could cook, and they'd get cooking skills, and then you could give them workout gear, and they'd have workout skills. Just 5 or 6 things that they could learn how to do, and I would try to maximize all of their skill points in all of those different areas. That was my game with Sims. And then I had a baby, and very quickly learned that she was not a sim character who I needed to fill up with skill points. She was a very independent, strong-minded child who I didn't need to make into a perfect person. One of the ways that I learned that was by having her exposed to all these different things that she ended up liking all of them. So it was not my job to make her the full skill point sim. She was like a whole human being.
I'm so glad that you got to that point. And your kids are amazing children. So you didn't ruin them by being more selective about the activities that they participated in. If anything, you probably made them better capable of making good life choices because they had to make some hard decisions when they were little.
Only my daughter did. My son did not. He's so easygoing. I said, here are your 2 things. He's like, great, let's do it. Makes it a little bit easier.
He'll have other learnings to do.
But you know what we don't do? We don't tell them if they're not doing something right to try harder.
No. I used to struggle with this. One of my kids really struggled with homework. And to this day, I still don't have the full picture of all of the things that were probably going on in his brain that made that really challenging. But I remember trying to sit down with him in the evenings to do homework. And it was a nightmare because he just couldn't sit and focus for another hour after he had been at school sitting and focusing for 6 or 7 hours. This kid just was not a sit at a piece of paper kind of kid. But I was still a young parent, and so I thought I'm supposed to make him have to do the homework. And he would literally throw his body on the ground and flop around like a fish. How are you supposed to teach a child anything when they're flopping around on the floor like a fish? You can't. I can't. And so for a while, I just tried harder. I would come at it a different way, different perspectives, but I was basically doing the same thing, which was making him sit down at the table with me to try to get the homework done. That was never going to work. What did work was communicating with the teachers and letting them know how much of a struggle we were having. And some of the teachers actually did allow us to adapt the homework so that it wasn't always sit down and do homework and have this massive fight every single night, because it wasn't good for him. It wasn't good for us. It wasn't helping him learn. I had to actually really reshape how I approached it, which was to go to the teachers and say, help me. This isn't working. What else can we do?
So instead of saying, let's try harder to do homework, you looked at the underlying issue, perhaps an ADD or perhaps just a miscommunication between what he identifies as useful in his life and what the society identifies as useful. And then you sought an alternate solution of going to the teachers and saying, is there something else we can do to help develop this kid? Because this one's not working. This one size fits all does not work for most, especially for your son, who, by the way, right now as a 20-something has the biggest heart, the most confidence, the sweetest guy, really into life, really drinking in the opportunities of life. So whatever you did and whatever the teachers allowed you to do, it worked for him.
It did work. I don't know if we just got really lucky being in the great school district. We had a lot of challenges with him because school just wasn't made for him. Square peg in a round hole. When he was in the first grade, I think that they were trying to learn how to read. If you spelled it out, it was SQIRT, it was squirt. Sit quietly in reading time. And so, as a prize, if they were able to sit in the reading time quietly and read, they would get a can of squirt. So, my son, hating learning how to read at the time, weighed his options, right? Like he didn't understand what the teacher was saying was, you are supposed to do this, and when you do it properly, you'll get rewarded. He was like, this is an either or. I can sit quietly and read and get a squirt, but I don't really like squirt and I hate to read. Or I can not sit quietly and not read and everybody will be happier. So that approach was never going to work for him. But he also did have a teacher who would tell him, Luke, sit down, please, because he would be standing behind his chair instead of sitting in his chair. 10 minutes later, she would say again, Luke, please sit down in your chair. And he would think to himself, I did sit down in my chair, and now I'm not in my chair. He would almost have no memory of getting up because his body just needed to be up. So that teacher got him one of those giant yoga balls instead of a chair so that he could sit and bounce because he just needed it. He needed to do that. Same with the teacher as with us. She could have continued to try harder or to force him to try harder to sit. It was never going to work. She thought differently. She reshaped it, reframed it. She thought of a different approach. That's always been so much better for my kids. It's been better for me when we stop trying to try harder and instead try to reshape it.
That's amazing. I remember you telling me that story and how impressed I was with that teacher.
Talking about kids in schools, the kids who really need extra help because of disabilities or because of autism, they can qualify for what we call IEPs, an individualized education plan. My son has one. He's in a wheelchair. He's got developmental delays. He's legally blind. So he hands down qualifies for IEP. We don't even have to worry about it. But there is this gray area of kids who kind of fall into needing an IEP, but could also potentially graduate out of needing an IEP. I was at a meeting not too long ago of special ed teachers, and they were concerned because the percentage of kids in our district who were offered IEPs this year had gone up from 15% to like 22%. And they were trying to figure out what was wrong that we were offering 22% of kids IEPs. Thankfully, one of the other people attending said, why is that bad? Maybe 15% was too low. Maybe we were underrepresenting the kids that actually needed it. And as I was thinking it over later, I get this isn't possible right now, but I desire for every kid who's in school to have an IEP, to have an individualized education plan, because school is just, it's a cookie cutter. It doesn't work for a lot of kids. So I wish that we would take different approaches, and instead of trying to force kids to try harder to get good grades, that we would really rethink it, reshape it, and do it differently.
So right now they have 78% of those kids who are saying try harder to fit into the common mold. You don't need to be individual. And they want to increase it to 85% of kids who need to try harder to get into that
Yeah.
mold. Where IEP has this connotation of something's wrong with you and you need to be accommodated. Whereas if you look at the words individualized education plan, you're right. Every kid on the planet should have their individualized education plan. And our system
Yeah.
doesn't account for that. It's not set up for that. And I totally understand that. But each kid is actually individual and shouldn't be encouraged to try harder to fit into that mold. Fit into your own
Yeah.
mold.
That's why I always loved the teachers that were willing to be really creative with us about how to get the learning done.
Right.
Fourth grade was the best year for this kid because it was such an active, a physically active year. One of their activities was they had to select a historical figure, and then they had a wax museum. And so they had to get costumes, they had to write their little speech, they had to do something interactive so that when the parents came along, they would either have to push a button or they would have to string something or whatever it was related to the kid's topic. And let me tell you what, this kid learned so much about this particular figure because he didn't have to sit down and read it in a book. He physically, his body had to participate. And then he also had to interact with other human beings in order to make this thing happen. They did things like that through the entire fourth grade, and it was the best year for him.
I feel like we're really lucky for a lot of the same reasons. I live in Quebec, and the school system is much different than in the US. There's high school, which is 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th grade, those 5 years. And the high schools tend to be specialized in some way. So you're specialized in engineering or in coding or something else. And the school where my son is right now, they specialize in sports. And so they have an 18-day schedule. Out of those 18 days, 15 of those days have PE. They want every single day for those kids to have their heart beating fast for 20 minutes minimum for their PE. So PE is an hour long, but they want those kids to be active. And I can't imagine a better fit for my athletic son than to be in PE and doing all sorts of different things. And they have these great sports facilities, and they have a gym, and they have a track, and they have a pool, and they have an ice rink, and they get to use all these things and stay active throughout the day. And I just love that.
That is so smart. I never could understand why middle schools eliminated recess and playgrounds. They need the playground in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade more than they ever did, and they need that free time.
Right.
I don't know why they think that just going from the 5th grade to 6th grade means automatically that you don't need to move your bodies as much, and you don't need that open free time that every single second is structured, including the 4.5 minutes you have to get from this class to that class. It's a nightmare for kids like mine.
Years ago, a friend of a friend gave our family a foosball table, and for a couple of years it got clothing on it and stuff like that. But I cleaned it off a month ago. And I said to my son, let's go down, let's play foosball. And we hadn't played in years. And so we played foosball. This kid wiped the floor with me. And I'm like, what, have you been down here sneaking foosball? And he said, no, we have a foosball table at our school, and I play every single day. And me and my friend Dylan, we own the table. Kid hustled me. But
Wow.
he has that free time. He has that free time to explore and to have that social interaction of who's going to play foosball and how do you manage who's going to play next, and all of those amazing things to learn that don't have to do with sitting and reading a book or writing on a piece of paper.
So we've talked a little bit about ways that our kids both had opportunities and didn't have opportunities to try harder or to try differently. What are some of the challenges as adults that we get the message that we just should try harder?
If you relate to this content, please click and share and comment.
Thank you.
I'm going to dive deep, and it is try harder to look the way you're supposed to look. Healthier hair, we need brighter skin, we need fewer wrinkles, we need to be skinnier, but also look healthy and not anorexic. And we need to do it all on our own because we need to try harder to do those things. And that's impossible and unhealthy and impossible. So I was working in Northern California several years back, and I had a daughter who was preteen, and I got a job offer in Orange County, California. And I had spent a lot of time down there. That's where my corporate headquarters were. And when I went there, everyone had blonde hair, big, long blonde hair. Everyone was tan. Everyone was skinny. Everyone had the best clothes on. Everyone had the Botox and the lip filler. And I really had a concern about raising my daughter in an environment where she would have to be competing based on what she looks like. So I didn't take that job. That was a major concern of mine, that she would have to spend a lot of her effort and her time and her self-esteem trying to look a certain way. And I think that's just unhealthy as an adult.
I agree. And I think if we grew up like that, it's very hard to shake that. I have spent my entire life trying to lose weight. And when I was a teenager and trying to lose weight, the only message that was out there was that if I wasn't skinny, and athletic was also not an option at that time, it was skinny or fat. That was it. And the message was if I was not skinny, it was because I hadn't tried harder, or because there was
Right.
something wrong with me, or because I had made bad choices. What I'm finding interesting now in this time of our culture is that now there's medication available. The Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy. There are options now. And the first thing is it demonstrates that it's a medical issue. It's not a willpower issue. It's not a try harder issue. But also, I'm starting to wonder, and I don't know yet. I don't think we've had enough time to shake this out. But when it first came out, I started to wonder if the narrative would shift from if you're not skinny, it's because you didn't try hard enough, to if you're not skinny, it's because you are too poor or broke to afford the drug. So I don't believe that there's a world where we start to say, if you're not skinny, it's because you're not skinny, because you're healthy, you're curvy, you're athletic. That the not being skinny is not a deficit. But I think instead it's going to shift to this idea of if you're not skinny, it's because you haven't taken care of yourself enough to go seek the medical help to get on this drug. And I'm sure of it. I'm sure that there are people who are looking at heavier set people wondering, why aren't you on that?
I
Is it
think there
because you're too poor? Is it because you aren't don't care?
there is that narrative, but I think there also is a parallel narrative about beauty standards changing significantly. Okay, I'll give you Exhibit A. One of my favorite people to admire, Ilona Maher. I love her. She didn't want to be a pioneer, but she is a pioneer. She's a rugby player and she looks like a rugby player and she is strong. And she was on Dancing with the Stars and she's beautiful. And she very kindly took on this pioneering of we've got to love ourselves and we've got to allow other people to love themselves. I think that narrative is equally as strong as if you're not skinny, it's because you're either not trying hard enough or because you're broke. I think there's a parallel narrative that we need to feed of we've got to start loving ourselves the way that we are and not blame, and not even by blaming someone or saying you're not trying hard enough, we're saying that there's some value in being the other thing. And maybe we
Yeah.
need to start seeing the value in being whatever our body is.
Yeah. I love that narrative that you just described. I can see how it's parallel, but I don't think it's as strong as. I
I'm
don't
not
think we're
sure.
hearing the messages as strong.
I think it is where we live. And no heat to California, no heat to Minnesota. When I first got to Quebec, I saw these women, like usually older French Quebecois women, and they were lumpy and extremely proud walking down the street. They had nice clothes, not even rich clothes, but just they looked put together and they had nice shoes. They really looked totally put together, but lumpy and with gray hair and with wrinkles. And they were just going about their life perfectly happy with the way that they are. And I was just incredibly relieved. Okay, this is the community I want to live in. That there's no expectation of being anything other than what you are. So I do think that there are biases in the feeds that we're getting, depending on where we live and what we pay attention to.
Okay, I could see that. And I also will concede that a lot of what I see and believe about it probably is still left over from the childhood messages. Like, I'm
Right.
starting to think that the messages haven't changed, probably because the messages haven't changed in my own head. I mean, they have, but I still hear them. I
Right.
very vividly remember the first time that somebody in our parents' friend group, I had told him that I wanted to be in television. And he said, "You're not going to go into television looking like that." And I look back at those pictures now, I was absolutely perfect, pitch perfect in weight. I would die right now to go back to that body. But at the time, it was too curvy. It was too curvy for television.
I'll bet it was the exact same friend of our parents who said to me when my daughter was 1 year old that I need to lose the baby weight.
Yeah, probably was. And
Oh,
that person has a gigantic beer belly. So I'm
not
not
only
listening
that, but
to
I
you
think we're giving
anymore.
him too much of our mental energy, and probably did back then too. The only ones coming up to us to say anything were these older men telling us we're not skinny enough, which is
Yeah.
inappropriate. So I have a rule in my house. We don't talk about other people's food. We don't talk about other people's bodies. We don't. Especially an older man talking about a girl's body. It's disgusting. You don't get to do
Yeah.
that.
So I like how you reshaped this try harder to fit into a beauty standard. That try harder isn't going to work. All try harder ever did culturally was keep women starved and small and quiet. And the reshaping of that try harder is to really rethink how we view beauty standards, but not just to reshape the beauty standard, but to reshape our even wanting to strive for any kind of standard. Not just reshaping what the standard is to include curvier women, for example, but to reshape that it doesn't fucking matter.
You're absolutely right. What business is it of old men to have any opinion about the female body? They don't have a right to an opinion, much less to express an opinion that's not healthy for that woman.
It's not just limited to old men. There are also young women who are very critical of other women's bodies. And I can only imagine that they're just so unhappy in their own body, in their own head. They're so uncomfortable in their own skin that the only thing that they can do is take it out on other people.
The women who are criticizing or saying other women need to try harder to be a certain beauty standard, are those women matching their own beauty standard, or are they failing to match their own beauty standard in your experience?
I think the ones that I'm thinking of, influencers, match the standard on the outside. You know, you could make an argument that there would be a pretty cookie cutter standard for 2026 young female influencers.
I guess my argument is that there shouldn't be a standard, and by calling it the standard, we're buying into that. So yes, of course,
Yeah,
I can identify the 10 things you need to be beautiful in 2026. I'm just saying
yeah.
that shouldn't be the standard.
I think that one of the reasons that they are so critical of other women is because if other women reject that there is a standard that they should try harder to live up to, then in some way it diminishes the power that those women think they have because they're beautiful. If we start to become powerful, not because we're beautiful, but because we're smart and because we are powerful and because we're entrepreneurial and because we're courageous, if we start to get power for those things over beauty, then the women who have put all of their eggs in the basket of beauty are going to be threatened by that. Unfortunately, with age, those beauty standards, they're not sustainable. So at some point, they're also going to fall off of their own beauty standard. And then they're going to have to deal with the consequences of having put all their eggs in that basket.
So let's dive even deeper down this pool. So I'm a type 1 diabetic. I have been for 44 years, so a very long time. And when I was in college, I saw a new doctor, and the new doctor said to me, "Oh, your A1C is not good. It makes you and me look bad." And I thought, okay, A, it doesn't make me look bad. I have a disease. You're supposed to be helping me. And B, why are you taking credit for me not trying hard enough? I just met you. It doesn't make you look bad. Anyway, it was a terrible thing to say. But there was always this underlying message that I got as a type 1 diabetic that if I tried harder, I could manage the disease better. And on one level, that's true. It takes a lot of work. And the more work I put in, the more healthy I am. But there's this underlying try harder as a negative, not as a positive. Try harder as though I'm failing, not if you did try harder, you'd be more healthy. And it never seemed to translate to that positive, motivating try harder
Your diabetes is very well managed right now.
right now.
My guess is that it's not because you got better at doing the same things you were trying harder to do 20 or 30 years ago. It's because, same as our example with the being late for things, it's not a matter of setting your clock differently. It's a matter of a complete mindset shift. So my guess is that you had a mindset shift where the efforts that you put in, tell me if I'm wrong, the efforts that you put in toward keeping those numbers within a range that made you happy, it was because those things made you feel better, either physically or emotionally, but you probably claimed it as your own journey rather than simply trying harder because some doctors thought you should.
I was never motivated by someone telling me to try harder. That's true. And yes, I think over all this time as I'm getting older, the consequences of not putting the work in, I feel crappy. The other big piece of it is that technology is infinitely better. So I think that's a bulk of it. But it also is that I had to find my own motivation. And
Exactly. And that's exactly what we're talking about, which is try harder is never going to work. Figuring out what the obstacle is and figuring out what your underlying motivation is ultimately the only thing that's going to make that change.
so let's talk about that. How do we do that? Years ago, before I became more aware of my limitations and the downsides of try harder, I would take a little jar and I would write on a little piece of paper all the things I wanted to try harder at. I wanted to pay bills on time. I wanted to make more money. I wanted to take my kids to the park more often. I wanted to eat better. I wanted to learn how to cook. All of the things that I wanted to do, that I needed to fix that plaster on my wall. All of those things, it became overwhelming. And so I put them on little pieces of paper and I folded them up and I put them in the jar, believing somehow that by writing them down and putting them in the jar, that they would all go away. I don't know what I was thinking, but I think the plan was when I felt motivated, I would take one out and I would just concentrate on that one thing and try harder on that one thing for a while. And then once I got better at that, I would try one more thing. And I tell you, it didn't go anywhere. It's the same thing with New Year's resolutions. Most people quit by the middle of January. So how do we get to this place of not being overwhelmed with all of those things we need to try harder on, and take each individually and reframe them to question whether that end point is healthy and valid? And is there an underlying reason why trying harder is not going to work? What else can we try to change whatever it is that's not settled well within us?
That's a great question. One of the things that I've always struggled with is saving money. I always have enough money to pay my bills, to buy my groceries. I very rarely have more than enough. Very rarely. And I did spend a lot of years beating myself up for that. Why can't I save? I should try harder, and putting little systems in place. Like I had the one where it would automatically round up to the nearest dollar and then put those cents into an account. And the theory was that over time, the 3 cents that I saved a couple times a week was going to amount to anything. But what really changed for me was I really had to stop and ask myself, why do I need to save money? Why do I even want to save money? Because there's some big scary boogeyman out there that is going to happen to me if I don't have the money. As I was starting to think about things that I would want to spend my money on, I had something in my head that I wanted more. There's a vacation that I want to take. I'm planning for a vacation with my family, my sister, to Ireland in 2027, which at this point is further than a year away from when we're talking right now. As I go through my day and I am tempted to spend money on things I really don't need, which has been my pattern to keep me right at I always have just enough, but not more than enough. Now I have a goal that I want more than I want that piece of jewelry or a new shirt or to go and eat out. So for me, it really came down to understanding my why and coming with a goal that I wanted more than not meeting the goal.
What transformed that from I'm going to try harder to save money to now I'm really motivated to save money? What was that black box in between?
For me, it was finally coming to the end of my rope with only always having just enough. It felt like being on a treadmill. There's so many things in life that are like this. My divorce is similar. When I was younger, I signed up to do a 60-mile walk, 60 miles in 3 days. So 20 miles a day for 3 days. And we had to train and train for this. I walked and I walked. And eventually, I got to the point where I took a step and it was the last step I could do until I had a rest, until I had a break. There just was nothing left in me for one more step. And you could almost always say you can always dig deep for one more step. No, there always comes a time when there's just not one more step left in me for this particular goal without either a break or a rest or a reshaping. That's what happened with my divorce. It wasn't the last step that broke me, it was the 1,000,000,000 steps that led up to what was finally the last step. And it was the same thing with the money. I just got so tired of not having enough or just barely or never knowing for sure if I was going to have enough that I finally just reached my last step. There I had no more of being able to fight that fight within me. The effort it takes to put the money aside became less of an effort than trying to dig deep and find one more step.
We've talked about two ways of getting to that. One is looking at the end point and seeing if that end point really is healthy. Try harder to get to what? To get to be skinny, to get to be tall, to get to be tan, whatever it is. And then the other thing is with the money, why is it you're failing in the first place? You were trying to try harder to save that money for some potential disaster that could come or couldn't come. And you weren't really bought into that. But when you reiterated that endpoint, the healthy endpoint is now you want to take a trip with the entire family. And that endpoint becomes motivating for you. And therefore, you're able to reframe that endpoint into a healthy endpoint that you believe in. So I think those two, reframing the goal and reframing your underlying reasons for failure, I think that's the way to do it.
You just hit on something else too that I hadn't really articulated or thought through was that there's no one single reason why a try harder isn't going to work or why I need to reshape in order to behave differently. There's multiple reasons. So you're right. I had multiple reasons why saving money was a challenge. I had a crap ton of children, which was a choice, and I wouldn't do it differently, but it certainly contributed. I was married to somebody who made it very challenging to save money. I didn't have a history of it. I hadn't grown up with this mindset. So there were just so many things that changing any one of them by themselves probably wasn't going to do it. I had to really chip away at each one of the things that I needed to change in my life. And ultimately, making the changes in my life, like getting the divorce, like my kids growing up and becoming independent, when all of those things either happened or I made them happen, some of these other things fell into place more naturally.
Let's apply this to weight loss because this is something I'm going through right now. I would rather not be the size that I am right now. I've been skinny my entire life, and as a type 1 diabetic, to be a little bit overweight is actually a sign of good diabetic health because type 1 diabetes, it's very difficult to put on weight. So because I'm in such good control right now, I'm able to put on weight, and I did. So now I feel like my clothes don't fit as well, and I just want to be a little bit more healthy as well. So I think that I look great. It's not the issue. It's really, I don't want to buy a whole new wardrobe, and I want to live longer. There are probably a lot of reasons why the trying harder is a fail. Sexual trauma is often a reason people put on weight. That's a really big deal there. And it's not about trying harder to lose weight. It's about addressing that underlying trauma. Menopause. You can't try harder to not be in menopause. We're women and this is part of our life. So trying harder in the midst of menopausal weight gain is not going to make any difference. There could be an injury, right? Same thing. So we need to look at the underlying cause of the try harder is a failure and not just the weight. And then if we look at the end point of that, do we really think that a skinnier body is healthier? And if we do, because I don't want to buy new clothes, or if we do because I feel like it's putting too much strain on my heart, if those are genuine endpoints, I feel like I can achieve those without the sort of try harder narrative.
I think one of the other challenges with weight loss is that we make the weight loss itself the end goal.
Yes,
And
exactly.
that can't be the end goal. But you just described not wanting to have to buy a whole new wardrobe. That's a motivation that you can put out there. The end goal, I think, for weight loss that ultimately is, I think, the most successful is to feel better, physically feel better. And the physical feeling better makes you emotionally feel better. But I have found that I don't feel better because I've lost weight. I feel better because I've started walking.
Right.
And I can't control whether I lose weight or not, but I do have some measure of control whether I get up in the morning and walk. And I used to hate to exercise. Oh my God, I had so many reasons to why I hated exercise. And one of the reasons why I hated exercise, which I finally just figured out in the recent years, is because of my tics.
Oh,
Do you know
interesting.
how hard it is to do kettlebells if you're ticking? I mean, I'm gonna hit myself in the head with those
Yeah.
damn things. So seriously, and even just walking or running, if I got a thought in my head that would make me start ticking, and I would be shifting in my pants while I'm trying to run or walk, it's impossible. Like I would literally sometimes stumble over my own damn feet because of my tics. No one ever talks about that. So I had to create a routine that felt good for me. So one of the things that's really helped me, and I started doing this because it's winter here in Minnesota and the sidewalks are shit. I started walking with walking sticks. My God, how different my walk is when I've got that something in my hands that helps the ticks in my shoulders. It helps the ticks in my feet and my legs. It's just incredible. So that was one thing that I really had to address in order to move forward with making walking a thing. But also because I have gotten older, I've released from myself the burden of having to work out, of having to go to a gym, of having to learn how to lift weights. I feel like, girl, if I can get out and walk right now at 57, I'm going to count that as a win. And it's actually working. I look forward to walking every day because
I
it
love
makes me
that.
feel good. And if I lose weight for that, that's even better. That's even better. But you cannot make losing weight the end goal because
You couldn't
you
try
can't
harder.
control that. I try honestly to avoid conversations about weight loss because it is such a stigmatized topic, and I don't think that weight loss in itself should ever be an end goal. I think if it's about feeling better, there's a lot of ways to go about that. There's a
Yes.
lot of ways to feel better about yourself that don't include like starving yourself or forcing yourself to a gym. So I do try to avoid that. But since we're talking about it, the only way to really move yourself in the direction of what you would consider a healthier weight for yourself is to address all the other shit that comes. For me, it was how much I hated exercising and finally coming to the realization that my body didn't want to cooperate with me to do a lot of those exercises. I had to find one that worked for me. And I had to address the issue of the menopause. Like that was just going to be a thing I was going to have to deal with. And there's a gift in this. Nobody looks at my big belly now and asks me if I'm pregnant.
Oh my
So I'm like,
goodness. Why would anyone do that? That's just wrong.
but people, when I was younger, people asked me that all the time. Are you, oh, you're expecting, aren't you? No, I just have a big belly. Now I love it. Yeah. Really? You think I'm young enough to have a baby? That's awesome. If anyone ever did. So, I mean, so I'm kind of like, I'm reshaping it. I'm reshifting the way that I think about my body and about my weight. And I'm making it so much less about my weight and about attacking the things that I do have some control over, attacking my motivation. Sexual trauma certainly plays a part in the reasons why we hang on to our weight. Right now, I am 0% in a sexual relationship, and it's helping my journey to weight loss because I don't have that pressure of that at all in my life right now. So it really is about not try harder, but really rethink the things that are getting in the way. And are they things I want to fix? Are they things I want to address? Are they things I want to change? Because maybe they're not. Next time on Super Random Things with those sisters. I don't know how to let myself express anger because it's been such a dangerous emotion for me to express. The other day, I was cooking and I was making like a bag of frozen potatoes and they were all frozen together. And so I slammed it on the counter and I started hitting it to crunch up all of the pieces. And it felt so good. I pounded the shit out of that bag until potatoes exploded all over my kitchen. But I still had all this in there. Like, and I was like, I don't know what to do with all this energy. My gut reaction is to suppress that, is to push it down, is to calm it through deep breathing, through self talk. I've learned a ton of really good techniques to help me not feel and process and express anger. And I'm starting to think, why am I doing that? Why am I letting myself try so hard to not let anger come to the surface?
I think there are probably a lot of reasons. One is that we were conditioned as women that we don't show our anger, that it ends up looking like rage, even if it's just surface anger or frustration or that we've had enough. Even a boundary is often called rage, which is not appropriate. For me personally, I hate feeling angry. I hate it. I probably am more likely just to push it down than to express it. Is it ever useful for that anger to come out? I mean,
Yeah,
what is the end goal of having that anger come out other than not tying your stomach up in knots? I mean, I think there might be some other ways of dealing with anger other than acting angry.
that's the question. When we don't let the anger out, we push it in. And what that has done for me in my life is emotional dysregulation, is overeating, is other addictions. That's what happens when I don't let myself express anger. There are a ton of healthy ways to express anger. I'm not talking about having to punch walls. But maybe if there was a gym that had a punching bag, I would love to actually express that in that way. What I'm saying is that I think anger has to come out physically. It doesn't have to be violent, but I do think that anger has to come out of us or it lives in our cells. That's kind of what I'm struggling with right now is how do I just let myself be angry about a thing instead of constantly talking myself down off a ledge? I don't feel like I have been given permission to let that out in the moment in any kind of way that affects anybody else around me.
Hey, Asma, do you like your mom's content?
I do. Do you like it, Kiwi?
I really do. I like my mom's content.
It's
Hey,
amazing.
like and subscribe, please.
Like and subscribe.